Starting or growing your business is hard work. But now you are listening to the Better Business Podcast with me, Steve Cook, and I'm going to try and make it a little easier on you. We on this podcast help you grow a better business with real advice from professionals, and today is no different. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you are listening to this. Welcome to the Better Business Podcast. My name is Steve Cook. I'm the host, and I am incredibly stuffy. I hope that it is not too distracting for you to be listening to this audio. But today, I want to talk about rejection. Earlier this week on the podcast, I interviewed a guy by the name of Matt. And he did something that I found incredibly impressive. Not only the fact was it incredibly hard to do with the idea of sticking to something 100 days in a row and videoing it, editing it, and all of the work that goes into that, along with having a full-time job, but also the challenge that he created for himself, to me, seemed incredibly challenging, pun intended. So if you have not had a chance to listen to that episode, what this guy, Matt, did was he challenged himself to be rejected 100 times in a row, 100 days in a row. So every day he would walk up to somebody and ask for something. He would try to get an extra deal of fries with his meal. He would try to, he said one of his favorite ones that ended up blowing up on TikTok was he tried to, he was an extra in a movie and he tried to get an additional role during the movie casting process. He would just do these small rejections. And I thought that that was incredibly impressive that he did that. So, what we are continuing the conversation about this week is this idea of rejection. And why I think that is so powerful is because your mind is one of the most powerful things, in this entire world. The Lord that created us created our minds to not only be able to adapt to certain lifestyles and certain things, but also our mind is able to get better at certain things. We're able to train ourselves, teach ourselves. We are able to learn new things. And your mind is so powerful. There has been many studies done that show that your mind is so powerful that it can actually control what your body does. Let me give you a couple examples. There was a study done in China, I believe, where they took a small group of individuals and gave them, I believe it was 10 individuals, and blindfolded these 10 individuals. And then they took another 10 individuals and blindfolded them. And so what they told group A was, hey, we are going to rub poison ivy all over your right arm. And on your left arm, we are going to rub a harmless herb or whatever it might be. Then they told the opposite group, or the other group, group B, what they were also doing, the same thing. However, they actually switched. So they told them that they were rubbing poison ivy over their right arm, but they were actually rubbing a harmless herb. And then their left arm, they told them they were rubbing a harmless herb on their arm, but it was actually poison ivy. And I believe the statistic that came back from that study is foggy to me, but I believe it was some 60% that had a harmless herb rubbed on their arm came back with a rash on that actual arm, because your mind is so powerful that it actually convinced your body that it was itching. It convinced your body that there was something wrong with my right arm. And that just goes to show you how powerful your mind actually is. There was another study done at a university. I believe this was in the 70s or the 80s, on free throws. So the basketball, people shooting free throws, and they took three groups. So they took a controlled group that did not practice at all and had that group there. Then they took a group A, or B rather, and they actually physically practiced a certain amount of free throws. And that study came back, and then group C actually practice free throws, I guess you could say, mentally in their mind. So they practice these free throws in their mind. So they practice mentally dribbling and they practice mentally shooting. So they had these three groups there. And groups B and C actually improved almost the exact same amount. So the groups that practice just mentally and the groups that actually practice physically shooting the actual free throws almost improve the exact same amount. Your mind is so powerful that it can actually teach your body to do something to train your muscles um, by doing that. So I hope you are convinced that your mind is powerful. I hope that you are convinced that you can improve your life. You can learn new things. I would imagine that the majority of people that listen to this podcast do believe that. That's why you are listening to a podcast that talks about improving your business. So, why not challenge yourself? Why not try to teach yourself to become used to rejection? Why not do something similar to what Matt did and become normalized, treat your mind or train your mind to become used to rejection? There was a quote by the name of Bryant McGill that said, "Whatever makes you uncomfortable is your biggest opportunity for growth." I'm going to repeat that back. Whatever makes you uncomfortable is your biggest opportunity for growth. I think that is where a lot of us miss out on our growth. If something makes us uncomfortable, like rejection, whether that's rejection in sales, whether that's asking an employee to do a certain thing, whether that's asking your spouse to do a certain thing, whether that's trying to establish a better relationship with your children, or whatever that means for you, getting used to rejection, getting used to this idea of being uncomfortable in the form of rejection is your biggest opportunity for growth. Right now, I'm reading a book by a gentleman by the name of Michael Easter, and he wrote a book called The Comfort Crisis. And he's talking about this idea of actual physical discomfort and how that actually makes us mentally tougher, and that makes us there's a lot of growth that comes from being physically uncomfortable. He went on I believe it was a 38-day hunt in Alaska in a teepee with him and two other individuals, and talked about how uncomfortable he was, but all of the growth that came along with that journey, that venture that he went on. Again, that was called The Comfort Crisis book. I think that you can become better at everything in your life, but this idea of rejection, I think, on the opposite side of being comfortable with getting rejected, on the opposite side of being okay with rejection, being okay with being made fun of, is some of the biggest opportunity for growth. I look at my business career, if you will, and think about 5, 10 years ago, I'd say 5 to 8 years ago, when I began to actually cold call different individuals, and how intimidating and how scary and frustrating that was to actually physically walk onto someone's place and talk to them for the first time, and how after doing that for a certain amount of time, it becomes second nature to you. It is not personal, it's not a big deal, and the huge opportunities for growth that came along with that. Of course, there was a lot of rejection along the way, but that has been some of my biggest opportunities for growth. So I ask you at the end of this podcast, I ask you in conclusion of this podcast, what stands between you and success? Is it getting used to rejection? Is it creating self discipline in your life? Is it being more creative? Whatever it is, whatever stands between you and success, everyone has different things that they can be better at. I think that this idea of rejection is something that a ton of people can benefit from. And I hope that you would give that podcast that I did with Matt a chance and talk and think and reflect on the challenge that he did, and maybe not do the exact same challenge yourself, but to think about getting used to a little bit of rejection in your life. Maybe it's once a month, maybe it's once a week, maybe it's once a day, like he endured for 100 days in a row, but getting used to rejection, asking for the things that you want in your life. In there, like Bryant McGill said, is your biggest opportunity for growth. Thank you for listening to this solo episode with me. I appreciate you listening to every episode, but especially these solo ones that you have taken the time out of your day to listen to my thoughts around a certain topic. If you have listened to this episode and enjoyed it, or enjoyed any episodes, or have some feedback that you think would be great for me, whatever it might be, please send me email from my website, send me a Instagram message, a Facebook message, whatever is convenient. I would love to interact with you, whatever the case may be. Thank you for listening.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Better Business Podcast with me, your host, Steve Cook. You know, starting or growing a business is hard work, so I hope that today's advice made it just a little bit easier for you. We'll be sharing more about this exact topic all this week on my social platforms. You can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, or if you would like to get a personalized blog post from me on this topic, you can join my email list, and I will send you an email once a week. You can check the show notes to subscribe to that, or find me on my website, whatever's easier for you. Now get out there and go grow a better business with this advice from today's Real Pros. Thank you for listening.